Everyone, this is Strawberry Podfic. We are reading Hysterical by Spark the Fangirl, Chapter 13, A Security Issue, Part 3. The Meeting of Two Foes. Summary. What else should he have done? Midoriya fell on his head as the portal he had jumped into, almost entirely accidentally, spat him out on the floor of a bar. The bar was empty, other than Midoriya, the man responsible for the portal, and the villain he had been chasing at the school. This was fortunate, considering Midoriya would have been thoroughly embarrassed had he fallen out of nowhere in front of an audience. He jumped to his feet and brushed off his pants as the two villains stared. Well, that was unexpected. I suppose I should probably introduce myself. It seemed that Shigaraki did not actually care about who Midoriya was, as he instead lunged towards him with his hands outstretched, and with the intention of turning him into literal dust. "Whoa!" Midoriya exclaimed, dodging the head. "Hey, can't you chill out for a second? Stop moving, brat!" Midoriya did not comply, but watched as the hand he had only just avoided closed around a glass on the counter, disintegrating it. Well, shit. You see, Midoriya had absolutely no intentions to become disintegrated, and as such was not very pleased with this development. Rather, he decided to hop the bar to get away from Shigaraki. "Stop that!" Shigaraki said, hopping the bar as well. Midoriya yelped and began to chuck the bottles of wine that lined the back wall at the villain. "Begone, you crusty old man!" he said, as he tossed a particularly expensive-looking bottle, which hit Shigaraki's head with a particularly satisfying thunk. "Oh, you are going to die!" Shigaraki growled. At the same time, Kurogiri looked about as disinterested as a man made entirely of shadows could be. That was a Lafite Rothschild. "Can't dive, you can't catch me!" Midoriya taunted before arming himself with several more bottles of expensive wine. Shigaraki took this as a challenge. Midoriya, having realized his mistake in taunting a murderous villain miles away from anyone who cared about him, made a break for the nearby door. Unfortunately, Kurogiri was having a minor breakdown in front of the door as he lamented the lost alcohol. Midoriya skidded to a halt and turned on a dime only to come face to face with Shigaraki. Gah! He dove to the side and slid across a tabletop, only slightly botching the ending. For a solid minute, the two played chicken as they faced each other from the opposite sides of the table, neither one willing to make the first move. "Damn it, I can't even get out of here because that one dude's blocking the doorway." It was at this moment that a new voice, sounding suspiciously like Bakugo, interjected into his far more logical thought process. "So, if there ain't a door, then fucking make one." And there was an idea. With a flick of his wrist, and the slightest bit of one for all, Midoriya slammed one of the wine bottles on the table, sending shards of glass and wine everywhere. This included not on and in Midoriya, but not being able to feel pain, he really didn't care that much. Shigaraki, on the other hand, screamed as the glass flew towards him because he, like most people, had experienced pain and decided to be opposed to it. Taking his chance, Midoriya charged to the other side of the room and quite literally punched through the wall, effectively creating his own exit. Midoriya thought he might be lost. The bar seemed to share a wall with an apartment complex that he had accidentally infiltrated, and was now wandering rather aimlessly around. It seemed he was unable to find a way out, and as such, he had taken to trying the doors as he ran past, although this was not working very well, as they were all locked. "Stop running so I can kill you!" This was a good way to make sure that Midoriya did not stop running. As he neared the end of the hallway, he threw away all semblance of manners and ripped open the nearest doorway, dropping the handle as he pushed his way in. The apartment was really quite dusty and looked very abandoned. This made him feel better in that he was now fairly certain that he hadn't woken anyone up with this little chase of his. However, he was slightly concerned as to where the previous occupants had gone. He was also concerned with the lack of time he had to prepare for what was sure to be a thrilling battle with Shigaraki. The concern trumped the other, and with it in mind, he searched the room frantically, looking for anything that could possibly be useful. His eyes landed upon an urn sitting on the mantel. Jackpot! Sure, there was that bit of him that said that stealing one's urn was rather unethical of him, but Midoriya was under the impression that he needed it more than the previous owner did, and it wasn't exactly like the current occupant could complain. He then used several of his precious seconds to run to the kitchen. In Midoriya's experience, kitchens could be very deadly places. He was just hoping that in this specific instance it would prove to be more deadly to Shigaraki than him. So It was that armed with an urn, a knife found in the drawer, and really one of the most reckless and foolhardy plans he had ever had, which was really saying something if you are to consider his proposed solution to the avocado incident, although I really shouldn't speak of that for a number of legal reasons. Midoriya waited for Shigaraki. He didn't take long. Midoriya could hear him searching the rest of the apartment from his position next to the doorway of the kitchen. He waited patiently for the footsteps to get closer, then he leaped at Shigaraki, stumbled back in surprise. He failed to do so in time, however, which meant that Midoriya's knife found its mark and slashed a large gash directly above Shigaraki's eyes. He screamed bloody murder and clutched at his face with one hand while flailing wildly with the other, disintegrating everything in reach. This was Midoriya's intention, and by some stroke of luck, it happened to work. Backing away from the hand, Midoriya grinned and crouched down on the floor, opening the urn as he did. You see, the dusty residue Shigaraki's quirk left behind looked suspiciously like the ashes of an urn. I'm sure you can see where Midoriya's thought process came into play. It was a clever idea, considering he had no idea how much dust a human body would produce, and he had no doubt that Shigaraki did. Now, you may be wondering why Midoriya did not simply let himself be disintegrated. Being immortal and all, there are actually two answers. He wanted to get back to school as soon as possible, and that involved not dying beforehand. And, of course, he simply did not want to experience disintegration, as he imagined it would be rather unpleasant. So, in order to avoid such a fate, he quietly dumped the urn onto the floor in a neat little pile as Shigaraki, not so quietly, tried to find him. Midoriya then waited until Shigaraki's hand pressed against the back of a chair near the urn's contents before screaming like he had just been killed. Mind you, he had no idea what that would sound like, and had actually not had reason to scream like that for the entirety of his life, but he tried his best. His best was actually quite good, considering that he was basing it upon the multitude of screams he had heard from people who had seen him die in various ways. Screams that were typically, pardon the pun, quite hysterical in nature. Shigaraki, thinking he had won, grinned and stood up straighter. "That's what you get, brat!" As he triumphed and struggled to stanch his bleeding in order to actually be able to see Midoriya, be able to actually see, Midoriya snuck behind him and out of the apartment. It was time to go back to school. Chapter 13, Part 4. Chapter 13, A Security Issue. Part 4, The All-Knowing. Summary. Our beloved rat god makes another appearance. After faking his death and escaping from the villain base, Midoriya ran a few blocks before realizing he had absolutely no idea where he was. He had left the slums, to which he had found himself teleported to, but he was still in a part of the city that was entirely unrecognizable to him. After considering his options for a moment, he stuck out a hand and hailed a nearby taxi. "Where to?" the driver started. "I'm sorry, but is that blood?" Midoriya looked down at his uniform. The white shirt was now quite red. "Don't worry, it's not mine." "That's not what I meant." He trailed off as he watched the boy buckle up both himself and an urn he had been carrying for some reason. "UA, please." "What? You know, the hero school?" Midoriya looked confused. "I can give you the address if you need it. I just assumed—" No, it's fine," the taxi driver answered in a bit of a daze. You see, he was at that very moment contemplating if he was giving a villain a ride to the prestigious school. After all, no normal student of UA would go to class dripping blood. His problem in this assumption was believing Midoriya was normal in any sense of the word. Nearly 48 minutes prior. "Oi, rat face!" Bakugo opened the door with a well-placed kick, only to find Nezu turned in his chair facing him almost as if he had expected Bakugo. This is because he had in fact expected Bakugo, an expectation which is to be expected when one carries the title of being the principal that expects everything, even the unexpected. Although, to be fair, Bakugo's presence couldn't be classified as unexpected, seeing as how Nezu had seen him on the cameras as he approached. "Can I help you?" Nezu asked. This was purely for formality's sake, as Nezu was fairly certain he could, and more than that, having seen the portal that seemed to just appear on his school grounds, he thought he also knew what the issue was. "Yeah, sure, whatever." Bakugo rolled his eyes, trying and failing to act nonchalant. "Just thought I'd tell you that Izuku got himself unintentionally kidnapped." "I know," Nezu smiled widely. He fell into this warp gate shit this one villain had." "I know." Bakugo glared. "Yeah, well, if you're so all-knowing, then I bet you know that the villain had some top-secret document or something that he stole." "I'm well aware." "Aren't you going to do something about it?" "I already have. I have determined through a method of deductive reasoning that the document was taken from tomorrow's schedule. From this, I can deduce that there will be a villain attack at some point tomorrow. So? Nezu's grin did not falter. So what? What are you going to do about that? Oh, nothing. What? Well, I figured it would be a very good hands-on practice for both the teachers and the students. You're not even going to tell the teachers? Why would I? It'll be far more entertaining if they don't know. Or, as Aizawa would say, it is simply a logical ruse. Bakugo opened his mouth as if he was about to yell at Nezu again. He closed his mouth. For a minute they were silent as Bakugo contemplated the nature of his principal's sadistic tendencies. Okay, you know what? That's fucking hilarious. I'm not even gonna try to stop you. Nezu smiled. But anyway, don't feel the need to try and rescue Izu. I wasn't planning on it. Bakugo gave Nezu a wary look. Alrighty then, glad to see we're on the same page. I'll, be going now. He gestured to the door. Just make sure Izu gets back to class when he gets back. It would be my pleasure, Nezu's smile remained as it had for the entirety of the conversation. Bakugo shivered. For the second time within an hour, Nezu found a student wandering into his office. Midoriya, like Bakugo before, was also expected. Hello, Midoriya, Nezu said, without turning around. Hi. He sounded a little breathless, as if he had run all the way there. Nezu spun in his chair to face Midoriya. It was strange, while he had been expecting the boy, having seen him enter the gate, and also having heard Bakugo's recount of that day's earlier events. He was not expecting him to be covered in blood and, judging by the smell, wine, nor was he expecting the urn Midoriya cradled as if it were a literal baby. The previous occupant was not actually a baby, or at least they weren't at the time of cremation. I suppose most everyone was a baby at one point. You look like you've been having fun. Midoriya shrugged. I trashed a bar, faked my death, and traumatized a cabbie. So, yeah, I guess it was pretty enjoyable. By faked your death, do you mean you used your quirk, or did you quite literally fake it? Literally, I could have used my quirk, but the villain had this, disintegration quirk or something. It looked pretty uncomfortable, so I just used an urn and a knife to make it look like I was dead. Nezu was quiet for a moment, and Midoriya shifted uncomfortably. Midoriya? Yeah? Remind me to teach you about espionage. Huh? Nothing. Anyway, I assume the warp gate took you to the villain's base? Oh, yeah. Excellent. Nezu pushed a button on his desk, and a hologram of the entire city popped up. Would you mind directing me to the area? Midoriya smiled. No problem. He looked at the map. His grin faltered. He started to point. He stopped. Gosh darn it. You don't remember, do you? Not even a little. No matter. I mean, there was, a bar, and there was an abandoned apartment building next door, and it was kinda in a scary area. Don't worry about it, Midoriya. Just do try to increase your awareness, won't you? Midoriya nodded. Now, I promised Bakugo that I'd send you to class when you got back. Why don't you get back, and we can talk about this more later. I believe that Aizawa is currently teaching. Oh, good, Midoriya smiled. Aizawa doesn't scream when I do things like some of my old teachers did. He just sighs. He is quite wonderfully resigned, isn't he? Nezu agreed. On that note, I don't suppose you brought any alcohol from that bar, did you? Midoriya looked down. Only what's on my shirt. I didn't take any of the bottles. Why? No reason. Nezu made a mental note to ask Hizashi what Aizawa's favorite brand of whiskey was. Chapter 13, A Security Issue, Part 5, Villains Beware. Summary. Midoriya makes a from. I messed that up. Summary. Midoriya makes a friend. It's probably a problem. I'm back! Midoriya kicked the classroom door open. Aizawa took one look at the state of his resident problem child and dropped his head onto the table and groaned. Stop being so fucking obnoxious! Nice to see you too, Kachan. Midoriya, the designated lunchtime has long since passed. Where were you that you deemed it necessary to grace us with your presence so late in the day? Ida stood up and chopped his arms as he spoke. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that Ida regularly chopped his arms when he spoke. No one knew why this was. It was just something that happened, and people had collectively, and without discussion, decided to accept it. I'm not actually sure. A warp gate took me there, so I don't have the actual location. Midoriya. Aizawa sounded very tired. Is that blood on your shirt? Midoriya looked down. Oh, yeah, some of it. And the rest? Aizawa asked, sounding as if he'd rather not know the answer. Wine? You're underage, child. Well, I didn't actually drink any of it, hence, he gestured at his shirt. Why, it's on me and not in me. One last question. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. Why do you have an urn? Midoriya looked at the stolen urn he had been carrying with him. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Don't worry, it's empty. He took off the lid and turned it over. Nearly 1.5 handfuls of ash trickled down and heaped on the classroom floor. Now it's empty. Okay, yes, but why do you have an urn? Midoriya shrugged. Why not? Because no one here has need for an urn. I'd seriously doubt that. Midoriya held the urn up in the air. Anyone here want an urn? Slowly, Koda raised his hand. See? Aizawa turned his attention to the resident shy child. Koda, why do you want an urn? Midoriya scoffed. Well, obviously he doesn't want it for himself. He wants it for Senor Kanehito. What on earth does Senor Kanehito want it for? What do you think a bunny would want an urn for? Aizawa had no answers. The obvious explanation was that Senor Kanehito wanted it for the exact same reason anyone else would want an urn. He wanted it to store the ashes of a human corpse. Just go sit down, Aizawa said. All right, Midoriya complied. Aizawa continued with the lesson. After a moment, he realized that Midoriya, unlike the rest of the class, was not taking notes. Midoriya. Yes? Why aren't you taking notes? Ah, Midoriya shifted awkwardly. Well, you see, I just realized that I accidentally broke 3 of my fingers earlier. You just now realized that? He shrugged. No pain, remember? Sometimes I don't notice until I try to use whichever limb I've broken at the moment. Midoriya put a finger to his lips and began to mutter. I assume it was when I cut the hand, dude. Or maybe when I hopped the bar. Oh, wait. Probably actually when I punched through the wall. Get out. What? Midoriya looked back up as Aizawa regained his attention. He looked both confused and slightly afraid at the harshness of his tone. You see, Aizawa simply did not have enough energy to deal with Midoriya that afternoon. This was quite understandable when you are to consider that there are very few people that could deal with Midoriya's unending chaos even on a good day. These people amounted to Bakugo, whose chaos, while not equivalent to that of Midoriya's, still could be considered to rival his, and his mother. Inka was just special like that. You heard me. You clearly can't do anything in this condition. Go fix yourself or whatever. Oh, okay then, Midoriya said, with obvious relief. And maybe you can change shirts while you're at it? Uraraka asked. Yeah, that's probably smart. After grabbing a spare shirt from his gym bag, he always had one on hand for situations like the one that had just occurred. Midoriya began to wander down the halls in search of a janitor's closet or something similar in which he could kill himself. This was because, the last time he had used a bathroom, he had been caught mid-death by Aizawa, an incident he would rather not repeat. Unfortunately, this ended up being a rather difficult task, as any door he came upon seemed to be locked. He was almost ready to give up and just use the bathroom again when he walked into the D-Wing, which was, for plot purposes, almost entirely empty. You see, it was actually entirely empty, except for one particularly interesting character, the one and only Mei Hatsume. Hatsume was, by all means, a support prodigy. This was because of a combination of talent, refusal to listen to reason, and an overall disregard for common sense. It was because of the latter that she was testing a new version of a blast shield she had made on herself and against a high-powered bomb of her own invention. There was a very large explosion as the bomb detonated, destroying a large portion of the hall. Luckily, Hatsume and the shield survived. Midoriya, however, did not. To elaborate, the force of the blast threw him against the wall with so much raw firepower that the impact quite literally caused his spine to shatter upon impact. As if that wasn't enough, the heat caused near-instantaneous burns to bloom across his front, incinerating not only the already ruined shirt he had been wearing, but also the spare one he had been holding. Now, typically, in such a situation, Midoriya would have screamed, not from pain, obviously, but simply the surprise of feeling his eyes melting out of their sockets would be enough to warrant a few yelps out of anyone, even Midoriya. However, for better or worse, Midoriya was dead before he could even register the heat of the explosion. Hatsume lowered the shield and turned around, surveying the damage she had caused. It was, to put it lightly, quite extensive. It was during this inspection that she noticed the body slumped against the wall. She also noted that it carried the irrefutable markings of a corpse. Specifically, the blood and blistering skin were quite telling. Oh, shucks, she said. Now, I must interrupt to tell you that you should never, ever follow the example of Hatsume, or the majority of these characters, for that matter. Rather, if you happen upon a corpse, you should most likely stay away and call your local authorities. If you, like Hatsume, were the cause of the corpse, then you should proceed in an entirely different manner, one I am not equipped to teach. You see, upon realizing that she had just committed manslaughter, Hatsume decided that the best course of action would be to dispose of the body and thus any evidence of this egregious error. She began to drag Midoriya back to her workstation with the intention of using her newly created flamethrower to incinerate him. This was easier said than done, considering the consistency of Midoriya at this point made him quite difficult to handle. For a second, she wished she had an urn that she could use to store his ashes after blasting him with the previously mentioned flamethrower. This was quite funny, considering how until half an hour ago, Midoriya had been carrying an urn rather religiously. However, I do not think he would appreciate becoming the one to occupy it. Hatsume dropped him once she reached her now-demolished desk and shifted through the rubble to find her flamethrower. She dropped it almost as soon as she found it. This was not because she was clumsy, however. Whatever Hatsume might be, she was not clumsy. Actually, it was the shock of seeing the body she had been dragging glowing with some sort of gold thing coating it. She flattened down to the ground and watched as the corpse pulled itself back into a not corpse. Whoa! All of a sudden, it exploded in a cloud of glitter, much of which went directly into Hatsume's face. She didn't actually mind too much, considering she thought all explosions were very neat. She did look at the now fully restored boy in amazement, and wondered if some combination of the chemicals she had used in the bomb had acted as a sort of reviving potion by healing Midoriya. Briefly, the thought passed her mind that the key to immortality was gunpowder. This is not true. Gunpowder is explosive and does not restore anything. Do not attempt to concoct any healing potion using gunpowder. If you do, then at least don't hold me responsible and tell the rest of your friends and loved ones not to either. I'm afraid I simply don't have the time to fight more lawsuits about causing dead bodies right now, so this is your warning. I'm back! Midoriya yelled as he woke up. This was sort of his default phrase to say when he woke up after dying. Oh, nice! My fingers are better! Fascinating! How'd you do that? Midoriya looked up at the strange girl he was pretty sure had not only just killed him, but was also trying to get rid of the evidence, going by how he woke up in a different location than the one he had died in. He looked at the manic expression she had, and how she was completely ignoring the glitter that was falling off her face. He looked at all this, and very irrationally decided to trust her. My quirk, he said. You have an immortality quirk? Yep, it's kind of on the down low, though, although it doesn't seem to bother you much, so... You can't die? Well, I can, that's what I just did. But I don't stay dead. Do you like support gear? I suppose. How do you feel about explosions? They're pretty neat, I suppose. Hatsume clapped her hands. You're hired! What? Hatsume stuck out her hand. Welcome on board, Hatsume Industries. I now appoint you head lab rat. Your paycheck will consist of any support gear you could ask for. Work hours are sporadic. Your safety is not guaranteed in any way. Midoriya studied the girl who had just killed him, and very clearly wanted to do it again. He only had one answer. I'm in, he grinned maniacally as he shook her hand. Every villain within a 50-mile radius shuddered. Notes. Let the chaos reign supreme. And that is it for this chapter. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys next time.